In no particular order. Maison Margiela, Spring 2024, Couture by John Galliano. And Pat McGrath, like if you think about it. We are starting with arguably the best runway show of this decade, and really, it could be in the running for the best runway show of all time. This runway collection was John Galliano's farewell to his tenure at Maison Margiela, and perhaps his final farewell to fashion forever. The haunting beauty of Pat McGrath's glass skin makeup did a lot of heavy lifting for this show's viral success, but like the best art, the collection keeps rewarding a closer examination for those patient enough to look. If I'm being honest, this collection is a dangerous place to start for most new fashion fans because once you've seen this, you will find nothing else like it. The techniques in this show are the real star for me personally. The story of the development and execution of those techniques could fill a whole book. We simply do not have time for it here, but we do have to give this outstanding collection its flowers. And despite me starting this off with one of the most standout collections of all time, this list is again in no particular order. Let's move on. Alexander McQueen, Spring 2001. Maybe the most influential runway show of all time. This collection features a number of historically important dresses, including the microscope glass slide dress, which is made of actual glass slides that have been painted red, and red-dyed ostrich feathers on the lower half. It's an incredible fashion metaphor for fragility. Similarly themed, we have a dress made entirely out of razor clams, delicate and gorgeous. Obviously, there are going to be thousands of incredible runway shows that we couldn't include in this list. What we were mostly looking for as qualifications is that it needed to be post-salon era and just runway shows that we have decent video footage of. Is something missing that seems so obviously important to fashion runway history? It's probably because there's no video footage of it. Undercover, Fall 2006 by Jun Takahashi. Perhaps the most worshipped women's wear collection by men who love Kingdom Hearts. This is early Jun Takahashi perfected. The legacy of the show further cemented by the fashion establishment clutching their pearls in horror if a designer ever dares to cover a model's face. These clothes are trying to codify the mysterious woman who is the heir apparent of the Thieves Guild, or the beautiful airship assassin who lives a double life. I was the target audience for this runway show when I was 16 years old. It may just be my bias, but I still look back at these clothes with just complete affinity and reverence. Gucci, Fall 1996 by Tom Ford. Some shows get included because they changed the course of fashion history. Gucci, as a company, was failing. They brought in a handsome young man from Texas named Thomas Carlyle Ford, and he very literally saved the company. This isn't Tom Ford's first show at Gucci, but it was the most impactful. It pulled the industry out of the trend of shabby chic popularized by Margiela and Marc Jacobs and birthed the 90s trend of being as skinny and sexy as possible, for better and for worse. The heroin chic mind virus in fashion started here. But on a less somber note, every few years, there's a cultural object that defines what sexiness means for a new group of young adults. Tom Ford's Fall 96 show for Gucci is one of fashion history's biggest contributions to that conversation. Balenciaga, Fall 2021 Couture by Demna. This collection of clothes is trying to find a new language of couture. When the golden age of couture had been gone for decades, here, Demna tries to find a way to keep it alive. He's asking difficult questions. Can you apply the rigor of couture to a t-shirt? What about a denim jacket? There are certainly some looks here that fit the general perception of old world couture. We have, tuxes, we have beautiful evening gowns, but somehow we find ourselves also micro-slicing leather to make a fuzzy bathrobe, or fitting a domed hat that draws attention while keeping its wearer hidden. The finale was a faithful recreation of an original Cristobal Balenciaga designed wedding gown. The design does not look like it has aged a day. What an honor that we get to make progress while still taking the past with us. Hussein Chalayan, Fall 2000. The conceptual runway show titled Afterwards. The ultra-iconic moment is when a model steps into a low table, then lifts up from the center to reveal that it's a wearable skirt. Chalayan made this collection about fleeing home, the refugee experience, where you have to decide what you are able to take with you. We can see that the living quarters in this show are converted into packable and often wearable items. There are elements from this show that are still being put on mood boards over a quarter century later. It is performance art done correctly in the framework of a runway show. You might notice a distinct lack of menswear shows on this list. That's because we're going to just do a separate episode that's all menswear. Comme des Garçons, Spring 1997 by Rei Kawakubo. Easily one of the most influential runway shows of all time. And apparently the runway show that Rei Kawakubo is personally the least angry about. She is famously never happy about her own work. Trying to speak about this show in a paragraph is impossible. I am thrilled to say that we have an hour-long analysis video about the process that led to these incredible clothes and more of an open-ended discussion about Rei's design language generally. It's a rare fashion collection that has something new to contribute to the conversation about humans, our identities, and our bodies. It's also one of the cleanest ways to witness Rei Kawakubo's famously exhausting design process entirely through the completed clothes. And if anything that I just said was confusing, then you are on the right track. Strong contender for the greatest runway show of all time. Long live Rei. Rick Owens, Spring 2019. If you ask 10 Rick Owens fans which collection is the best, you are guaranteed 10 different answers. For me, this Rick Owens show includes my single favorite runway look of all time, featuring the Mountain Witch parka. It bounces and negotiates with the body in a way that makes me feel like I'm looking at animation rather than live footage. Additionally, this show poignantly speaks to the story of the Tower of Babel. That marks the era of Rick's career where he is focused on the themes of futility, the inevitability of death, and dignity. Vivienne Westwood, Spring 1994. On this channel, we usually speak about the late Dame Vivienne Westwood in terms of her being misunderstood. There was certainly a brief period of Viv's life where she was developing one of the most well-known chapters of countercultural aesthetics, but she is too often only spoken about as the godmother of punk. While many of those pieces are important to fashion history, they just kind of... I don't know, man. It's a long sleeve t-shirt that's been ripped up. I don't know. But Viv's runway show, Cafe Society, is a much brighter reflection of what she spent her life making. A romantic, sexed up look at the past. When I look at this collection, I start to think that women have always had a commonality with each other. Like as if a young woman today could be just blasted back to the 90s and slip right in with a friend group of other women. Then all of those women could travel back to the Victorian era and make fast friends there too. There's a sweet optimism that is missed when we try to pigeonhole Viv in her early work. Christian Dior, Spring 2007, Couture by John Galliano. Johnny G found his inspiration this season in Puccini's Madame Butterfly, an opera that deals with how love and imperialism intersect. It is lavish and extravagant and heartbreakingly beautiful. This is John at his absolute best, despite what's going on in his personal life. This show is just full of unique detail. I bet the Issey, honestly, was fucking crazy back in 2007. While we still contend with how to approach cultural appropriation today, I think this show in particular says something strong on that topic. How alluring and beautiful and romantic it can feel to reinterpret the clothing of a different culture, and how well-intentioned that process can be while simultaneously understanding the diminishing effect that work has. Galliano himself walks out at the end in costume, fully embodying the American soldier in the opera who abandons his Japanese wife. How charming you look in your A-line dress, Mama. My mom has returned to wearing dresses every day. I am quite pleased. Now see, if you look too cute, then we have to include it, you know? Gucci, Fall 2018 by Alessandro Michele. This is a top 10 runway shows ever for me personally. This rather disturbing collection features multiple models walking with a high fidelity replica of their own head, a bizarrely realistic dragon pet, and this girl has a third eye. And the clothes are just You tell me if I'm exaggerating, out of fucking control. Alessandro seems to be dissolving and mismatching identities. In this way, it is a runway show that is fully in dialogue with the cultural rise of the internet. Maison Martin Margiela, spring 1990. Universally hailed as one of the greatest runway shows of all time, it is hard to see this collection with fresh eyes in the present. This was the first ultra-successful guerrilla runway show, which just means it was off the fashion calendar. It was responding to the excesses of Parisian fashion by incorporating literal trash into some runway looks. And of course, in a highly controlled environment like a runway show, it features the spontaneity of local kids running around during the show itself. There's a lot of elements here that would not work in the present. There is one part of this that will always remain relatable, no matter how dated the clothes might look. It is a group of friends getting together for a creative project and making it happen by any means necessary. Go make stuff. It's this beautiful underdog story where the disorganized no-name designer who, again, isn't even on the Fashion Week calendar, managed to get the top show at Fashion Week. The presentation was so effective, Raf Simons cried and decided then and there he wanted to do this with the rest of his life. Christian Dior, Fall 2012, Couture by Raf Simons. Dad had already gotten experience wielding simplistic design during his time at Jill Sander. It, surprisingly, worked very well when he ascended to the creative lead at a house that had become so deliberately theatrical under John Galliano's tenure. For a French house that, for all its beauty, risks being suffocated under the weight of its own stuffiness, Raf did an incredible job of making you forget all of that when he renders the best of Mr. Dior into a couture collection that is focused on the A-line silhouette. Chanel, Spring 1995 by Karl Lagerfeld. This show is the single best example of Karl Lagerfeld's design language. This is the most recognizable and universally loved aesthetic of the last 100 years. I'm sure that others would have a different answer for the same prompt, but for me, this has a great showing of the tweed suits, a playful color palette, hip chains on full display, cheeky jokes like shopping bags as if they're accessories, even some costume jewelry on bikini bottoms. I wonder what that's supposed to look like. Some strappy evening wear, playful androgyny, and a bunch of guys carrying women on their shoulders for no explained reason. Like actually, this like went on for a super long time in the actual runtime of the show itself. I know this aesthetic has not aged super well, but if you can empathize with the women of the 1990s, Karl created a world for them where they were safe, hot, and fabulously wealthy. It's a world where everything is beautiful and nothing has to hurt. Perry Ellis, Spring 1993 by Marc Jacobs. It's the show that got Mark fired, or maybe it didn't actually. Maybe that's been misreported. We made a whole episode about it. It's actually a really weird situation. This show is generally credited with the beginning of the grunge movement in fashion, but the truth is that there were 3 different designers doing a grunge show that same season. This collection is an incredible example of corporate interests versus cultural interests in the fashion industry. It's also a fantastic example of Marc Jacobs' early design language. Again, if you want to get the full story, we have an outstanding episode about it. Celine, Spring 2011 by Phoebe Philo. An outstanding collection featuring the work of our Lord Mother Sensei, Phoebe Philo. We've said it before on the channel, I will say it again here, Phoebe is the cornerstone of the fashion world we currently live in. Her list of now famous students is so long that I can't include it here. But to keep us focused, this runway show, her 3rd for the House of Celine, is such a great example of a brilliant woman designing clothes for other women. That's rarer than it should be. Brilliant woman designing for other women, like what you picture in your head, this is so much stranger than that. It's a subtle design language, but once it clicks and you can see it, you start to wonder why Miss Philo isn't the centerpiece of all modern fashion conversations. She should be. Back again, Rick Owens, Spring 2014. In fashion, we are always looking for new ways of being a human, new experiences and emotions that can be shared and celebrated. Rick brought in step crews for this fashion collection. I'm going to make a huge point about this. Runway shows too often do not hire people who are capable of executing a certain skill. They want dance and they try to teach a supermodel how to dance. Supermodels can't dance, they're models. Get a dancer. And for anyone who doesn't buy what I just said, look at this footage. Look what we would have missed. No supermodel can deliver on what these women are bringing to the runway show. Models are great at what they do, but they cannot go maximum aura like these women are right now. Rick wisely knew that the effect would be lost if it's not coming from the women that do this for real. Believe it or not, videos like this take an extraordinary amount of work. Just setting up the lights in this room took like an hour and a half. And the interesting thing that I found for this episode in particular is that writing this took 10 days, easy. But I wouldn't have been able to write it in the first place if I didn't already have the experience in the industry that I've gotten up to this point. So it's like, yes, this took 10 days to write, but really it took 12 years and 10 days to write. I am only able to just vacuum in all of this information about the industry I love so much because this is my full-time job and it is my only professional focus. Daniela and I work 7 days a week, 10 hours a day. We hardly ever take days off. If you want this stuff to stick around, please support it. We very proudly do not use AI for any of our writing. All this shit is coming straight off the dome. We primarily make these videos for an audience that will be watching them 100 years from right now. I hope you can join us and be part of that mission. Alexander McQueen, Spring 2010. The show is called Plato's Atlantis. It is rare that a show this late in the career is worth mentioning, but McQueen's final show before his untimely and tragic log-off became a trend for the entire industry, but also introduced some of Lee's most timeless work, most notably the armadillo shoe, which was further popularized by Lady Gaga. Plus, the silhouettes are just fantastic here. The color palette is unusual and pretty extreme for McQueen. All the beautiful colors of ocean life used in an otherwise rather tragic runway show. Maison Martin Margiela, fall 1994. This collection started a lot of themes that would define the work at Maison Martin Margiela. The numbering system started here. The replica line started this season. But the single best idea was clothes for a doll. They proportionally scaled up all the elements of the doll's clothes. Like if we pull up a picture of an actual doll here and zoom in on her hand, the yarn compared to the size of her hand is gigantic. So if you proportionally scale that up for a jacket for an actual adult, the yarn is going to be like as thick as my arm. The buttons are, of course, humongous also because buttons on a doll clothes are humongous for the doll. Like most fashion designers, Martin dressed his dolls as a child, so this idea felt like a full circle moment for the whole industry. This is very much a designer's designer runway show. Dries Van Noten, Spring 2015. Dries is a dutiful designer. His overall body of work is incredibly difficult to summarize or to give a brief description of, but if I had to give you a single show that captures this aesthetic, it would be this one. Particularly the flood at the end, where the models all emerge to walk to a particular spot on the grass and lie down. It is a fabulous example of a runway show whose set dressing helps the audience to better understand the context and the vision for the clothes. John Galliano, fall 1994. This was the moment of John Galliano's ascension to high fashion royalty. This eponymous collection was modest, but extremely effective. He was completely broke and just wanted to make clothes. Potential is such an interesting thing. Through this group of clothes, you can see the vision that John would carry with him for the rest of his career. There's a high drama to everything and a clear aspiration to take it so much further than this. But this is the show that convinced the fashion industry kingmakers that they had found their new monarch. John would go on to live one of the most insane life stories in modern fashion history. Those wild hats, by the way, are the work of Stephen Jones, who is still making the best hats in the world. Alaya, fall 1991. Fashion loves to borrow beauty from the natural world. We're all familiar with that concept by now. But when Azzedine Alaya did it, it was in service of strong, magnetic women. In this Hallmark Alaya show, it almost feels like Azzedine invented leopard print, though of course he didn't. leopards did. His work clung to the body of the world's biggest supermodels, who exuded this confident ferociousness. Contrasted with this delicate and psychedelic butterfly motif, Azzedine attempts to speak about the complexity and wholeness of women in an honest and somewhat romantic way. Every major Elia hallmark is present in this show, which is too many to name here, but at its core, Azzedine's work centers around his love for powerful women. Jean-Paul Gaultier, fall 1995. I wish I could include all of the exciting runway shows that JPG was responsible for in this 3-year period in the 90s, but I just have to mention this one in particular, which we technically do have runway footage for. It is not the Mad Max show, it is the Mad Maxette show. Get that shit right. Monsieur Gaultier offers us a dystopian vision for the end of the world, but make it fashion. The collection introduces us to Gaultier's brightest moments, the cyberdots in particular. What is, at the end of the day, a rather cost-effective idea, the cyberdots can be best appreciated in their execution, where the multicolored dots simultaneously enhance and define the women's features while allowing the body to remain entirely abstracted. This is one of those ideas that feels so simple now that anyone could just do it, but importantly, Jean-Paul did that idea during this show alongside dozens of other great ideas. Balenciaga, fall 2020 by Demna. One of the most powerful runway show stagings of all time. The audience appeared to sit in a room where floodwater had risen. Overhead, a massive screen showed rolling clips of violent weather patterns. Models stormed through the shallow black water, wearing clothes that feel aesthetically perfect for the final era of a livable Earth. This show is an excellent example of Demna tackling a difficult subject in a way that does not feel forced and leaves an impression on the viewer. As for the clothes themselves, it's an experience. Demna designs clothes that seem gimmicky or usually just normal in pictures, but when they're on your body, you understand. The clothes prioritize the wearer more than the viewer. Considering that Demna is the ultimate post-internet designer, that's quite a feat. Jill Sander, fall 1996. For the record, this is the era when Jill Sander is at her own company. Jill's work is known for bringing a foundational minimalism to women's wear. She was a pioneer. I see this show as Jill beginning a conversation with the industry about how much rigor should be applied to women's clothes. The standard up to this point had largely been that menswear is simple and it's well made. Jill was saying, can we get the women's wear up there with the menswear as far as the quality is concerned, please? To what extent can the rubric and the rightness of menswear be applied to women's wear? How much of the standards amongst menswear shouldn't be so specific to men? In this show, Jill offers a proposal that even 30 years later is as valuable and future-minded for the industry as it was the day it was shown. Anne de Meulemeester, spring 1998. If there's a season where Anne's multitude of punk rock and romantic references come together, it's this one. I could go on about Anne's love of Patti Smith and poetry, but to keep it brief, de Meulemeester was inspired by a poem where the religious concept of holiness, often reserved for only the purest of things, was being used to glorify the messy, real, bohemian stuff of everyday life. The most obvious part of the show, Anne uses the word holy on her clothes and on tank tops left on every seat in the room, rebelling against the shame and exclusion and superiority that's usually created by religion, and also usually created by the fashion industry itself, if I'm being honest. And because it's a fashion show at the end of the day, de Meulemeester applies those thoughts to the human body, clearly labeling and blessing arms, legs, anything really. At the end of the day, it's a show about kindness. Atelier Versace, fall 1997 by Gianni Versace. This is the final runway collection by Gianni Versace before his tragic assassination. Donatella has certainly built a successful fashion empire on her own after the loss of her brother, but it is fascinating to see Gianni's final work if it's examined closely. His design language is often conflated with his sister's, which I think is unfair to both of them. In this show, you can see Gianni finding his voice using deconstruction elements, historic references, and that trademark sexiness that would come to define his legacy. Prada, fall 1988 one of the best first shows of its decade. Miuccia Prada took over her family business and introduced a fashion line. No one at the time understood what this show was actually trying to communicate. My wife's episode, which I'm proud to say is our most viewed episode of all time, the whole channel, the #1 episode, is actually the best one. This show is a delightful aesthetic exercise that mocks fascism from the perspective of someone who lived through it. There's a lot of range in these clothes. There's really something for everyone. It's hard to see the Prada that we know now looking back at this collection. Fashion designers have to be kind of given time to find their voice in most cases, but occasionally we have a young designer who just drops a singular vision on the first try. Oh, contemporary show alert! Are you sort of sitting there thinking that there are too many things that are very recent to be included in a list of the top 100 of all time?
Good, I'm glad you're thinking that.
Here's the deal about that. I run a media company. In it, we make YouTube channels for people to watch about fashion. As a media company owner, I can tell you 100%, no denying, the thing that works the best online is being mean. Every time this has been measured, it says that negativity moves so much better on the internet than anything that's neutral or positive. You want to go for extremes that make people angry. Because contemporary fashion has been largely promoted on the internet, where that negativity rule holds so true, there's an enormous amount of shit talking about contemporary design, the runway shows that are coming out right now. It is the strong, firm opinion of this media company that we are in the golden era of runway shows right now. Doesn't mean the stuff in the past was bad. Obviously, tons of that stuff is on this list. It's the majority of the list. But we are in an era right now that kids who are born in 30 years will ask you about when you are older. Just take a little bit of the negativity on Instagram with a grain of salt. There's a lot of work worth celebrating right now. Thom Browne, Fall 2024, Couture. Throughout his career, you'd think that Thom Browne was born to make and sell suits. He certainly does do that, but when this runway hit, you'd swear he'd been a couturier for decades. I try to say this as often and as plainly as I can. Amongst the fashion designers that serve a global audience, there is no one with a vision like Thom. He makes clothes that should make other designers throw their hands up and look at their team and say, what the fuck are we all even doing here? When a runway show like this exists, everything else feels like it's trying to catch up. I mean, what else do you want me to say about this? I can't go into all of the techniques because we don't have enough time, but those piles and piles of handwork speak for themselves. Or like, wait, how should we say this? You want to say like, do they shout for themselves? Extreme sandwich board for themselves? Skywrite for themselves? This shit is so good. Alexander McQueen, Fall 2009. In his most satirical show, McQueen takes aim at the larger fashion industry. It's not an uncommon theme for his work. Mocking the Chanel tweed suit and the Dior new look, while including an exaggerated houndstooth, as a broader part of his statement about how unoriginal and repetitive the fashion industry is. Trash bags hint at McQueen's disdain with overly extravagant and wasteful fashion. Most notably, however, was the white powdered faces of the models with large, overdrawn, caricature-esque lips. And, well, there was only one designer who loved a theatrical white-painted face at that time. This show is believed to be making fun of John Galliano and how he represented frivolity in fashion, despite how notably extravagant this particular show was itself. The finale is a black swan. It's supposed to represent how McQueen growingly felt about his own place in the industry. L'Envant, Fall 2006, by Albert Albez. The late Albert was often referred to as the nicest man in fashion. What's more, Albert defined the look of the aughts, the look that trickled down into all of the world's fast fashion when that was happening at a faster pace than ever. Despite H&M customers not understanding this girl boss versus fair lady juxtaposition that Albaz was going for, it very often felt like Albert had the first understanding of the kinds of women that we see today, like in our present. Women who are very confidently both in colorful sheath dresses and Saint Laurent style tuxedo suits. Looking back at this now feels so charming. Like, I wish there was a way I could go back to this simpler time in the industry when the nicest man in fashion was winning, before everything became digital first, before the great luxury slowdown. This collection is dated. It looks like a collection from 20 years ago, but that somehow makes it a little bit sweeter to look at. Valentino, Spring 2019, Couture by Pierpaolo Piccioli. Pierpaolo at the height of his powers during his Valentino tenure. This is one runway where there's a great case being made for uncomplicated beauty, something that contemporary fashion is usually very uncomfortable with. In the present, there always needs to be something wrong, something off. But Pierpaolo comes through with one of the most over-the-top, gorgeous, and life-affirming collections of its decade. Balenciaga, Fall 2007 by Nicolas Ghesquière. Nick's work is known for its high-contrast, silhouette-oriented proposals, which seems perfectly at home at the House of Balenciaga, whose roster of iconic silhouettes have become the foundational codes of the whole house. In following Cristobal Balenciaga's nature, Ghesquière delivers novel, futuristic silhouettes in this show, one of his most celebrated at Balenciaga. Double shoulders, jackets that look like you're being folded into paper, and most notably, the robotic legs, which, unlike the work of Thierry Mugler, are shockingly wearable. These are later adapted by Demna into the iconic Chevalier boots. Alexander McQueen, Fall 2006. Y'all, I tried. We were trying to limit the number of McQueen. It's not every McQueen show and it's not every Margiela show, but buckle in because there's more. We wanted to say 3 per designer. Impossible. You can't do it. It's so shitty if you try to limit it to 3. Another masterful show by Lee, drawing for the second time in his career from the Scottish roots, but now in this fantastical and almost pagan-looking collection. This défilé is a spectacular showcase of McQueen's best tailoring. I look back at this show with this haunted spectacle of a headpiece and impeccable gowns, and yet the tailoring, that's the centerpiece. That's the molten core. Chanel, Fall 2010 by Karl Lagerfeld. This season, the tremendous Chanel coffers were used to create exceptional showcases for some exceptional clothes. For tens of millions of women in the world, fashion is Karl Lagerfeld's Chanel. The scale of that power was prominent here in this show, especially when considering that they literally built a whole-ass ice sculpture inside the Grand Palais. Folks, I've been to 2 Chanel shows at the Grand Palais now. You cannot perceive the details of the clothes when the set is at this scale. But that was never important to Karl. Importing a glacier and making the most desirable clothing, that's what was important to Karl. When I look at this show, I can't help but think about the highly collectible Chanel Menadiers, which for this collection were just bags that looked like ice. Everything with Karl was so campy and so literal, but so cohesive. Iris van Herpen, Fall 2019, Couture. This collection is a pantheon of petulant demigods, twisting and vibrating between hallucinatory magic and organic technology. I'm just kind of being goofy with the description at that point, but it's kind of true. I feel that. The processes for making these clothes was developed in the 6 months leading up to the show, including an intense collaboration with artist Anthony Howe, who was able to create extremely small gears to cause the movement in the final look of the collection. Iris's practice has slowed down in recent years, but this show still stands as her triumph. This is easily in the top 10 best couture shows of all time. Chloé, Spring 2005 by Phoebe Philo. I never really expected that I'd be able to call a corporation a girl's girl, but I think that is the best way to describe Chloé, especially during the tenure of Phoebe Philo, whose work established a casual, desirable look for women. Yes, she later expounded upon that work at Celine, but not before showing us her signature clash of tomboyish femininity and introducing us to the illustrious Paddington bag. This show is often referred to as being foundational in creating the concept of the it girl, a concept that every brand since has strived to cater to and create, and that no one can achieve quite like Miss Philo. Calvin Klein, 205W39NYC, Spring 2018 by Raf Simons. There are some fashion shows that end up making a big enough legacy just through chance. It turns out that the Calvin Klein company was not serious about becoming a real fashion brand. They gave Raf Simons only a few seasons before firing him and going back to making terrible clothes again. But that unceremonious firing led to all of the clothes from this show selling at up to 90% off brand new, allowing thousands of young fashion fans to buy their first new piece. This collection and its extreme discount was the on-ramp for tons of fashion obsessives. And I definitely want to hear in the comments if you benefited from that rather scandalous business move. Hermès, Fall 1998 by Martin Margiela. What a risk. A brand known as the gold standard of luxury hires a designer who is anti-luxury and anti-fashion. Yet while at Hermès, Martin created the current benchmark of what luxury looks like in clothing. Simple, versatile, and extremely well considered. This collection of work is consistently studied by young designers and purchased at insane prices by collectors. Martin was in pursuit of perfect clothing. That mission, of course, is impossible, but impossible missions can sometimes help designers find answers that they would have otherwise missed. Prada, Spring 1996. Grandmama Miuccia has always advocated for smart women. She herself has a doctorate. Her design language has always been complicated and nuanced, but this show has come to define the elevator pitch for her whole career, ugly chic. Interesting enough, that's a phrase that Miuccia herself does not like. She's often inspired by things that she finds to be ugly, and here, that affinity for bright, ugly, at the time even, outdated prints, that held an undiscovered air of intelligence to it. You'll notice the cut of these clothes isn't really anything to write home about. The strength of the whole collection, and arguably of Miuccia's work more broadly, is that it creates a vibe. That term gets way overused, but if we return to the core of what vibe means, it's just a way of being. This collection presents one of the strongest vibe case studies in fashion history. Yes. The cool thing about this that's very motivating to me is that, like, as we're going, I keep scrolling and being like, fuck yeah, I love this show.
Yeah.
Wild and Lethal Trash, Spring 1998 by Walter van Beirendonck. Walt has spent his career consistently showing us aesthetics that we hadn't even considered before. There's something for everyone here. Gas masks, line dancing. Actually, it might just mostly be those two. This runway came about at a time when there was already so much change happening in fashion. Things were trending more and more casual. When Walter came in with this show, it cemented that we were in a completely new era. The rules of fashion were being thrown out. The people are about to go crazy. Robert fucking Woon. Fall 2024 Couture. I am sure that I have pissed off so many people by picking so many recent shows. Well, I am not sorry, but do y'all know who Robert Woon is? The man of seemingly infinite imagination. Storm gear to protect you from crystal raindrops, a pleated look that has been burned just right, a sartorial interpretation of human skin, another sartorial interpretation of human muscle. We got Skeletor for the bones and a show finale for the human soul. Robert is one of the only conceptual designers who needs no justification. Frankly, I've never heard a fashion skeptic question why these clothes were made. I think everyone just sees his work and is just grateful that it exists out in the world as physical objects. Christian Lacroix, Fall 1987, Couture. We're going a little earlier in the timeline so that we can include a show that just doesn't get discussed enough. This was Christian Lacroix's first solo show, and it was the first brand to get admitted onto the Paris Couture calendar in over 2 decades. At the time, a show with this level of imagination promised that the institution of haute couture could continue to exist as it had decades prior. That promise did not come true. Couture continued to slide further towards extinction. While it didn't technically save anything, we got a parade of color and shape that's still used on mood boards for those in the know. Louis Vuitton, Spring 2018 by Nicolas Ghesquière. Nick's design language at Louis Vuitton is defined by the idea of time travel. Ghesquiere's ability to mix contrasting elements from radically different times in fashion history resolve into a look uniquely its own this season, and creates a second wind for his career at Louis Vuitton. Despite all the radical futurism and sci-fi elements in his Balenciaga work, at Louis Vuitton, Nick found a way to express futurism through the dramatic embroidery of French revolutionary jackets, Sophie shorts, and striped cycling clothes. It's as if he keeps dipping into the primordial soup of fashion and pulling out different elements that somehow all come together. Balmain, Spring 2012 by Olivier Rousteing. At the extremely young age of 25, Olivier Rousteing ascended to become the creative leader of Balmain. With that appointment, he introduced what would become the definitive look of luxury for the mid-2010s. This combination of sleek black clothing with sparkling adornment and detail work. The symmetry of these tops and dresses guiding the viewer's eyes up to the face. Christian Dior, Spring 2004, Couture by John Galliano. This is one of the best examples of John Galliano's work at Dior. Like, yes, it is campy and ridiculous and so extremely Egyptian that I know that someone out there is rolling their eyes while watching this. But this is a campiness Hall of Fame all-timer. It successfully pulls viewers into its little fantasy world, and even amongst the Galliano designs that haven't aged well aesthetically, we can just fall back on the technique that went into every garment. None of this feels like a costume when you're in the room with it. It's just couture all the way down. Marc Jacobs, Fall 2020. A great deal of fashion design is about helping your audience see differently. In this show, Marc was attempting to help us see women's wear from the 1960s in a new light. Think back to the beginning of COVID. Even when they've been pared back and made minimal, many of these garments were just a tough sell for a mainstream audience. But Marc believed in those designs. He wouldn't have shown them otherwise. To help recontextualize, Marc brought in Carol Armitage, a dancer and choreographer known as the punk ballerina. She only appears at the beginning before being followed by a commanding troupe of dancers dressed in the collection, and then came the models. Visually, the execution of the show is so arresting, it forces the audience to reconsider what might otherwise be seen as just stuffy clothes from the 60s. Fashion Week is exhausting for press. There's a science amongst designers for techniques to wake people up and consider their proposal with fresh eyes. This is one of the best examples of a wake-up technique that I have ever seen. Issey Miyake, Spring 1995. It's a classic Issey mega show. 144 looks and almost too many ideas. Miyake treated his shows like a scientist, going to just crazy lengths to try to find new expressions through clothing. The bouncing looks near the end are still used in fashion runway supercuts. While the pleats were not new in the year of our Lord 1994, Miyake had recently hit on a part of his career where he discovered that pleats can be used in an entirely different grammar and use case, one that can create movement like in these now legendary dresses. Jill Sander, Fall 2012 by Dad Simmons. Just to get this part out of the way, this is the show that features the famous clip of Dad crying, but that's not enough to land it on this list. This collection only takes familiar elements of women's wear and then builds a collection that manages to look futuristic when it was shown, and it still looks futuristic today. The show is a lesson in the chemistry of fashion design. Raf does not use gimmicks here at all. It is just good fundamentals. This would mark the end of Simmons' legendary run at Jill Sander before Jill herself would retake the creative lead. Loewe, Spring 2023 by Jonathan Anderson. If you go back and review all of the Jonathan Loewe collections at the same time, there is a frightening amount of chaos and a low amount of cohesion. I still don't understand how, but he makes that good somehow. I'm not being sarcastic. It is good. I just can't fucking figure out how he does this. This collection is when Jonathan wielded chaos the best. There's a Minecraft moment, airless balloon shoes, and huge flowers can be seen covering the feet, breasts, and whole bodies throughout. As I watch this, I feel like I can hear Jonathan's sleepy voice saying,
"Isn't that just lovely to look at?"
Yes, John, it really, really is. Versace, Spring 2020 by Donatella Versace. Okay. I know there's a lot of kids watching this who don't know about this. I'm just going to say what to me, a 36-year-old, very old man, thinks is just so obvious it wouldn't even need saying. Jennifer Lopez attended the 2000 Grammys wearing a dress by Versace. It is generally considered to be one of the most successful red carpet looks of all time. The day after the Grammys, Google was a new thing and a bunch of people, a record-breaking number of people, were searching Jennifer Lopez in really skimpy dress so I can look at Jennifer Lopez, show it to me. And then an engineer at Google was like, oh, we should just make an images tab. And that's actually the story of how Google Images got made. All right, but I told you that story to tell you this story. 20 years later, J-Lo went full circle and walked the Versace show as the final look. It's rare that pop culture history and fashion history flow so seamlessly into each other. Junya Watanabe, Spring 2003. Affectionately referred to as the Parachute Show. This collection showed Junya as a master of recontextualization. Military-inspired clothing has always been overplayed in fashion, but these designs still feel like something that have never been replicated elsewhere. It's that combination of delicate feminine sundresses mixed with technical fetishism. This quantity of straps and harnesses would normally feel out of place in women's wear. Watanabe-san has some of the widest range of any designer currently working. Thierry Mugler, Spring 1997, Couture. When you're dealing with Mugler, you are going to get a big elaborate runway show. In fact, some Mugler shows are so big you might assume that they're compensating for a bad collection. L'Insects was definitive proof that there are no tricks. It's goofy, it's campy. This show is nearly 45 minutes long, but there is no skimping on the quality. You can skip straight to the most iconic designs, but the rest of the collection holds up for those that are willing to look. Rip in peace to the only man that could go this far out and make it beautiful. Welcome to the part of this video where all we're doing is funny runway shows. We have 5 funny runway shows in a row. It's all here in this section. Welcome to the funniest part of the video. Get ready to laugh. Laugh! Moschino, Fall 2014 by Jeremy Scott. Okay, look, 2014 was not that long ago. Think back in your mind's eye to the place that culture was in 2014. A lot had happened. People were not really getting shocked over things anymore. And then, a 39-year-old Jeremy Scott put SpongeBob SquarePants on a runway for the first time, and people were pissed. There's also a McDonald's Chanel mashup. We have a few takes on a cow suit for different climates, a lot of junk food wrappers that have been turned into couture dresses. Jeremy Scott is the only man who has made good use of the sheer audacity. Vetements, Spring 2020 by Demna. In other news involving fashion and McDonald's, we find Demna's final show at Vetements. There's a way to look at this era of Vetements that's quite serious. After all, this is the show that made even the Demna skeptics concede that he is good at what he does. But yeah, it's pretty funny to have a runway where it's a hall of fame of the weirdest people that storm into a 24-hour McDonald's location at 3 a.m. We have a security guard, a juggalo, a crazy lady, a juggalo, a one-woman bachelorette party, a juggalo, Charlie XCX's sister, and a young woman who likes listening to Insane Clown Posse. Truly, all walks of life are represented here. Avavav, Spring 2024 by Beata Carlson. Criticizing a system the only way that digital natives know how, by being really ironic and goofy. The idea here is that being an independent brand requires you to do and be so many things, so you just end up not being able to actually design. Many of the outfits have feedback notes written on them, like they're being sent back to the factory for another round of samples. Like this one where it says, add back, and then he turns around and there's not a back on the piece. So like that's the message. But the reason I included this in the list is because the models are being asked to execute on physical humor. Like the first look barely comes out before the audience is like, wait. Sunny, Fall 2022 by Loris Messina and Simone Rizzo. I feel like every person who is into runway shows has independently had the idea like, oh, wouldn't it be cool if they made them run? Wouldn't that make the clothes look cooler? The team at Sunny made all the guests switch their phones to slow motion mode, but they wouldn't say why. And then they sent a bunch of models down the runway, and some of these models look pissed. The design language at Sunny was well suited for this also. The clothes aren't being designed to like drift and float in these big, beautiful shapes. especially when you're looking at the photos. I'm more reminded of times when I've had to run to like catch a train or something, and I'm just thinking about how embarrassing it is to be doing this in public. Yohji Yamamoto, spring 1999. Fashion's most famous rake, Yohji Yamamoto, is a lifelong bachelor who decided to make a show about brides. Usually this show is spoken of with low tones of reverence, but I find it to be really funny, or at least very playful. Certainly, Yohji's cuts are worthy of respect, but this thing looks like a beehive. The opening looks veil, kind of looks like a beekeeper helmet, and models keep changing clothes or taking clothes off so that the backstage assistants have to keep sprinting on to the runway to collect everything before another model comes and makes another mess. It's not like ha-ha funny, but it's very charming. Yohji proposes many versions of a bride, including black dresses that are in various states of deconstruction, and a fun appearance at the end by Andre Leon Talley. You want to tell people about all the incredible benefits of the Patreon?
Patreon means that my children won't starve. That's the benefits of the Patreon. My goodness, what?
Isaac, you want to gas up the Patreon?
Don't subscribe to his Patreon. He's having too good of a year. Don't do that. Give it to me. Give it to me instead. Subscribe to my Patreon. I'm having an awful year.
Subscribe to Isaac's Patreon so he can yap about how actually he's buying Pokemon cards in a smart way.
Buying Pokemon cards in a really smart way, okay? Like, listen.
It's not gambling, for sure.
Listen. Okay, I need to go. Bye.
Versace, Fall 1991 by Gianni Versace. Sometimes a show goes down in history because it's an easy place for the media to mark a beginning. Here, Gianni Versace sent out Naomi Campbell, Linda Evangelista, Cindy Crawford, and Christy Turlington onto the runway together. They were bopping along to the George Michael song, Freedom. Those same models had also starred in the music video for the same song. Fashion media likes to say that this is the moment that invented the supermodel. It seems so obvious now, but at the time, the idea of the supermodel was revolutionary. This idea that a few women's faces could define an aesthetic era. The idea that for the human eye, beauty is not something that is fixed and objective, but that times could change and you want a different kind of beauty. The idea that beauty was not fixed, that there was no such thing as a scientifically, objectively perfect face. The idea that every era falls in love with a different kind of face. For me, that's what this show did. Johnny did not invent the supermodel with this show. That is, of course, not true. It's just fun to say. Wouldn't George Michael have invented the supermodel? Like, Chanel. Fall 2014 by Karl Lagerfeld. I think we all understood that there would be a lot of Chanel shows by Karl Lagerfeld on this list. Like, how could we avoid it? But which ones? They're all so huge, they're all so expensive looking, and they all have these insane sets. Ultimately, the molten core of what Karl gave us through Chanel is this, the supermarket show. This cemented the cheeky, ironic camp that Karl created. It's an aesthetic that, frankly, has surpassed the aesthetic legacy put forth by Gabrielle Chanel herself. The idea of a woman wearing head-to-toe Chanel while perusing the aisles of an American supermarket allowed even secular non-fashion folks to get the joke. This season is also a great example of Karl's ability to contextualize certain clothes so well that he can damn near convince us that anything, just anything, can be luxurious. It's a show from the past. This is an educational channel. I want you to look at this outfit and tell me that if it wasn't in this show, it would look good. This would look ridiculous without the contextualization of this show. But when you're watching the whole thing beginning to end, you're so caught up in like the Barbiness of it all that like he convinces you that things that I don't even know if this works at all, but it works in this show. Gualpe, Fall 2019, Couture. There are few images in the history of couture that are burned into collective imagination like this look. It's a show about the afterlife, wondering what happens and where we go. When I look at these clothes, I see a fashion designer participating in the long tradition of artists who have attempted to understand God through their own skill of craft. I think of these clothes as being in conversation with the world's most beautiful cathedrals, mosques, temples, the illuminated text of William Blake, the films of Terrence Malick. You get the idea. Each look is so overwhelming that it is easy to miss the kind of quirky, playful details. There's small dolls everywhere in this collection. This model has an open book on her stomach. And Miss Pei even emerges in the most beautiful dress I have ever seen on a designer coming out to just give a bow. I return to this show about once a year. It is breathtaking. Jean-Paul Gaultier, Spring 2007, Couture. This show is full of appreciation for the sheer beauty that Catholicism has brought into the world without irony. It remains, however, a standard Jean-Paul Gaultier show. It meaningfully pushes boundaries while remaining sincere. It's not sexless. It thoughtfully embraces feminine beauty without being outright inappropriate. When you think about all the JPG hallmarks, all of the house codes that are totally unique to him, I think this show often goes forgotten because A, it's couture, and B, how many cool, talented, exciting things has JPG done at this point? How can one person hold on to it all? Each look was given a halo, attempting to create new secular icons out of each of the looks. Prada, Spring 2000. It's rare that a designer offers an introduction course to their own body of work. Whether or not that was her intention, Miuccia Prada offered a collection of clothes that can be used almost like a brand guide. Nearly all of Prada's women's wear grows out of the very simple shapes and muted colors of this runway collection. Particularly beautiful in this one is the use of ostrich leather. But on the whole, while it may seem a little dated, these clothes can help us understand why so many women are loyal to the Prada look. For a certain kind of person, this is all they need. And that person's name is Tuba Avalon. Prada, you got to have a monthly retainer for my goat. I know they have literally already hired her, but yeah. Hire her more. Sakai, Fall 2014 by Chitose Abe. If you look at the women's wear shows leading up to this breakout collection from Miss Abe, it is painful how close that she is to finding her own voice. But this is the show where Sakai becomes Sakai. Adding a Sakai show to this list was painful and difficult because once she had established this baseline, Abe went on to conquer much more complex shapes of clothes. But none of it would have been possible without this comparatively simple foundation. Abe is still producing barn burner collections. Jacquemus, Spring 2020 by Simone Porte Jacquemus. A change of scenery goes a long way. Simone decided that sweeping landscapes would become a central piece of his design language. To be clear, this show is on this list because of its location, and I think that's a good thing. It's lavender fields, an underrated feature of the southern French countryside. This era of Simone's career would recruit millions of young women to begin their fashion journey with a suspiciously small handbag. But more importantly, the outside Jacquemus shows remind us that visual art mediums are usually just trying to adequately pay tribute to natural beauty. Rick Owens, Fall 2022. So many young designers copy Rick Owens. Have you ever asked yourself why the copycats can't ever get it right? I think they miss a foundational element of Rick's own design language. It's an old world elegance, the kind of elegance that your great grandma lectures you about. There's of course a badass hard edge here as well, but without that elegance, his work would seem as flat as the copycats. This show, more than any other Rick Women's show, demonstrates that sappy, sincere romance and elegance. It's hard to tell from the video, but when I was in the room that day, the fog made us see each look differently. The smoke was just thick enough to only show us the silhouette first, just movement and shape. And then once the model was close enough, you could see texture and color, but just for a moment before she disappeared into silhouette again. The intrigue, mystique, and glamour of this collection of clothes is difficult to find here in the present. I cried after this show. Vivienne Westwood, Fall 1993. The most interesting take I've heard about this show is that it's Viv trying to see British culture through the eyes of France, rather than her standard recipe of viewing French history and culture through her own English eyes. Honestly, I could just watch this straight through 3 times in a row with a prompt that's that good. And yes, This is the show where Naomi Campbell had her fall, and this is a great time to remind everybody that if someone attends a runway show in person, they film a model falling and then post it online, that person is a dick. It's all very funny, and it is charming when it's one of the most successful models in history, but most of the time, you're just publicly humiliating an independent brand, and more importantly, humiliating a young model who's just trying to make a career for themselves. That's not an equal trade for you to get some viral juice. Grow up, don't post it. Iris van Herpen, Spring 2020, Couture. No one sees the world like Iris. Despite the fact that her work appears otherworldly, she correctly identifies how alien-like parts of our everyday are to us. Marine microbiology, the nervous pathways of the brain. Movement for Iris is unquestionably part of the drama, with shapes and layers that move as if they are at home underwater. Iris creates movement that emulates how single-cell organisms move under a microscope. Drapery travels down the body like a signal being fired off from a brain cell. Obsessed with the microscopic elements of life, Iris van Herpen's couture, itself detailed to perfection, strives to instill the appreciation of close examination into the lives of others. I'm going to say something, and I understand this is not a popular or cool thing to say right now, and I'm just going to say it anyway. There is not a lot of diversity on this list. There are essentially no black women on this list, and there are very few people of color just in general, men or women. The reason that this is not ever pointed out by people who are in positions like mine is because people then open themselves up to being criticized, like I somehow chose to exclude people from the list. Well, we didn't do that. We made this as honestly as we could, but I want to be so clear about something. If you look at the people that are listed here and you don't see a lot of people that are like yourself, that means that we need you in the industry. We have had enormous problems in our history as an industry with sexism and racism. That is just plain to see if you go to Fashion Week. But I am a very strong believer in diversity because, first of all, it's just fair. It's just fairness. But even for someone that's an asshole that doesn't care about fairness, objectively, you get better results when there are people who think differently. You get better results when there are many voices from many different perspectives. Our industry has excluded people, and that makes it where there's not a lot of other people to choose from. I can't promise you a job. I can't promise you success in your career, but I can tell you that if you don't see people who look like you, it means that we need you. Back to it. Helmut Lang, fall 1998. There's obviously very few tech innovations in fashion runway shows because it is ultimately an art form that consists of showing physical clothes. But the one major turnkey upgrade to the medium was a switch to digital. For fall 1998, Helmut Lang live streamed his show online. He's the first designer to do so. Later, CD-ROMs were mailed out to media so that they could watch the show again. But because internet speeds were garbage back then, it's likely that only a few dozen people had the internet speed to actually watch it live at the time. Like all major changes, it starts slowly. Helmut Lang, fall 1994. Okay, look. The reason that we bunched the Helmut Lang shows together is to emphasize that it's really hard to talk about why Helmut's legacy is so good. Many of these clothes are way out of fashion at the moment, but it cannot be overstressed how much influence this body of work has had on most living designers who are working currently. If you're interested, we have an entire episode where we go visit the largest privately held Helmut Lang archive in the entire world, Endima Archive by Michael Kardamakis. We also have an extended conversation with him on the Patreon where he spends an enormous amount of time talking to us about the legacy of Helmut Lang and, more importantly, showing us the clothes that came out of that, out of the, I think, literally over 10,000 clothes that he owns from Helmut. It is an unbelievable video on the Patreon that I am still so incredibly proud of. Go check it out. Balenciaga, fall 2006 by Nicolas Gasquier. Nicolas is known for being fashion forward, literally pushing the idea of clothes into the future. This show presents a faithful tribute to both the work of Cristobal Balenciaga, while markedly bringing that work into the future, reimagining Cristobal's evening coat into modern skirt suits and capes. Richard Quinn, fall 2020. There's a group of fashion insider assassins that would mark me if I did not include Quinn in this list. And I'd like to assure them that I was already planning to do that, even without their threats. Sadomasochist themes in fashion start with Vivienne Westwood and continue to grow and expand for decades. The ball-gagged gimp tradition settles with Quinn. He wields those themes excellently, but more importantly, he finds a way to make S&M understandable for those who aren't drawn to it naturally. I'm having to talk around it because it's a YouTube video, but like we understand, I'm talking about like the whips and chains people in order to have an orgasm, this thing, yes? And I do feel like it is understandable. Like through Quinn's florals, the face coverings, the polka dots, even the smiling models, I see an excellent persuasive essay in defense of whips and chains. After all, for those who partake, S&M is play. Y Project, Spring 2023 by Glenn Martins. As of this filming, Glenn is still very young, 43 here in the year 2026. There's already 3 eras of his work: Y Project, Diesel, and now Maison Margiela. I love it all, but Y Project, and this Y Project show in particular, will always hold a place in history for the brilliant, challenging pattern design. The shapes of these clothes are so out of control, it damn near looks like they are, like the clothes are attempting to eat each other, or they're like fighting for visual dominance or something. Certainly, there are other Y Project shows that introduce famous designs from Glenn's tenure at the house, but this show in particular is each of his strong points all crammed together. There is such a delicate sense of balance with the styling here. Many ensembles teeter a razor's edge between being innovative and being stupid. I am still desperate to find some of the old pieces from this show. Unforgettable work. Celine, Spring 2017 by Phoebe Philo. Before we point anything else out, I want to emphasize that in the audience of this show stands Phoebe Philo's little daughter and her friends. Adorable. If there's a high-flying show by Phoebe at the height of her powers, this is it. Considering how much contemporary fashion is bound up in intellectualism, performative ethics, and just yapping in general, this show is a fantastic defense of raw aesthetics. We also have to note that the Eve Klein dress is usually cited as the single most iconic piece of Phoebe's body of work. I'm not sure I agree with that specifically, but one of Phoebe's students, a young man named Michael Ryder, can be seen with that dress during the production of this show. Michael would go full circle by becoming the new creative director of Celine in 2024. A.F. Vandervorst, Spring 1999 by Anne Vandervorst and Philippe Arix. One of the most influential shows of the fashion underground, influenced by the bizarre tone of a hospital and the way that people look when they are asleep. The audience timidly walked into the set where the models were already laying each on a bed. The audience took their seats and watched as the models rose up one by one to walk. Chance is incorporated into this show because the designers couldn't fuss with the clothes before each model walked, because once the girls were dressed, they had to go lay down and wait for their turn to walk. So heavy themes of imperfection there. Additionally, some of these looks incorporated permanent wrinkles the same way that sleeping leaves indentations on fabric and on skin. Beyond the clothes themselves, this runway show is a fantastic example of how much flexibility of tone is possible in fashion as a medium. Quietly sleeping in a hospital bed. Sometimes that's literally all you need. Comme des Garçons, Fall 1982 by Rei Kawakubo. Folks, if we gotta draw the line somewhere, it is here. This runway show is the beginning of the deconstruction tradition in fashion design. It's not Kawakubo's first show in Paris, but this runway, entitled Holes, is the show that shook the fashion world awake. Martin Margiela, Zuli Bett, Dapper Dan, Jeffrey B. Small, Carol Christian Pohl, Alexander McQueen, Glenn Martins, everything starts here. This runway show challenged the assumption that fashion may only exist as a finished, polished, beautiful collection of clothes. Like the best art, so many people hated it at the time, and so many people couldn't look away. Ray started a revolution in this show using holes in her knitwear and scratchy textiles. That revolution continues to live on through nearly every kid who submits a portfolio to fashion school. Long live Ray. Jean-Paul Gaultier, Spring 1994. JPG is often oversimplified. He's had an incredibly long career. He's got a long sheet of accomplishments, but perhaps the most impressive accomplishment is that this runway collection has never gone out of style. As of this recording, 32 years, that's 392 months, that's about 12,000 days. Daniela and I brag all the time to people that we have the smartest audience on YouTube. I know that you all are capable of looking at other shows on this list that maybe haven't aged very well. And I know that you can empathize enough with the people of the past to see those clothes in the context they were presented. But with this show, it requires no work. And honestly, it'll be interesting to see if this ever looks dated during my own lifetime. Monsieur Gaultier, congratulations, sir. Here's to another 12,000 days. He is a sweet person. I have never spoken to him, but I've seen how he interacts with other people. I've even seen him that at a restaurant, I saw the way that he interacts with people who are there to serve him. He's a kind person. I think he actually is in it for the right reasons. Yeezy Season 1, Fall 2015 by Ye. Before the 35-car pile-up clusterfuck of the last few years, Ye was actually a rapper. And then he actually made some pretty cool clothes, too. No one took him seriously until he created a look that ended up defining the 2010s. Thin, flesh-toned, stretchy bodysuits for women and military-inspired gear in earth tones for guys. This show played a large part of high fashion entering the mainstream. Ye's goals of creating a luxury clothing line at populist prices never came to be, but the aesthetic he commanded through this show is one that has been copied by hundreds of lesser designers. Simone Rocha, Spring 2026. The world is much more exciting and delightful because we have Simone Rocha's work. There's no one who embraces the sugary side of feminine beauty more than Simone in fashion, and no one who upends it so effectively at the exact same time. This show is colloquially referred to as the disgruntled debutante, capturing this perfect indifference. Drapery featuring fresh lilies, exaggerated doll-like silhouettes, a toddler-like mashup of organza with jersey, and quilting that feels awfully nostalgic. In this show in particular, I feel like Simone Rocha perfectly captures the spirit of a woman who, in her adulthood, still feels the need to protest her social obligations. At the core of every girly girl who really loves the color pink is a woman who is far more complicated than any doll has ever depicted. As a result, you end up with this very whole Simone Rocha woman, and as of late, a very compelling and incredibly exciting Simone Rocha man. Maison Martin Margiela, Spring 1996. Some shows are added to this list because they helped push the medium of fashion forward. To make this collection, the Maison bought vintage clothing items, photographed them, and then screen printed those photos onto the linings of different vintage dresses. So there's like one here with a beautiful cocktail dress printed onto it, another one with a fur coat. A huge part of Martin's legacy is the idea that the process is as interesting as the final product itself. This is one of the best examples of that principle. Victor and Rolf, Fall 1999 Couture by Victor Horsting and Rolf Snoren. One of the definitive conceptual fashion shows of the 90s. Victor and Rolf featured only a single model on a rotating platform. She began the show in a burlap dress. It's so plain and unremarkable, it sort of piques your curiosity, especially considering that it's a couture show. The designers emerge, and one piece of clothing at a time, they add layers to the model. This was to imitate the dressing of a Russian nesting doll, one inside the other. There were 10 layers in total. The really crazy part of this is empathetically looking at this young woman at the end and imagining what it felt like to wear 10 layers of mostly heavily adorned fabrics all at the same time. This weighed 70 kilograms. That is 154 pounds. This is a runway model. This woman weighs like 18 pounds. But look at her. Cool as a cucumber, stoic as can be. She does not even flinch. Also, importantly, this is one of the only shows that I'm aware of where the designer comes out during the show rather than only at the end of the show. Miss Sohee, Spring 2024 Couture by Sohee Park. It's hard to be a young fashion designer, and it is nearly impossible to be a young fashion designer at Couture Week. Sohee Park is able to dream a vision and build a world with the best couture designers. But importantly, she can back it up with dresses that are stunning in photos and in person. Miss Park has continuously released work that is hard to find in fashion now. I don't often get to use phrases like majestic fantasy, but Sohi always lets me use it as a treat when I see her shows. That's an independent designer, by the way. We're an industry that requires a lot of money, and so a lot of things come through big mainstream houses. If you are a millionaire and you need a bangin' dress, call Miss Park. Chanel, Fall 2026 by Mathieu Blasi. One of the most recent collections on this list. Mathieu Blasi's second ready-to-wear show for Chanel was the most technique-dense collection of clothes I have ever witnessed. Buttons shaped like blackberries, tweed that looks drizzled on, and a bright optimism that is so difficult to find in fashion's present. Danny Foster put it best. As we were leaving the showroom, she said, "Those are the clothes that women deserve." I agree. Comme des Garçons, Fall 2012. Grandma Ray is the only designer who has remained dedicated to a nearly impossible vision for her whole life. She is in a constant state of digging for newness. If you go back and review her full body of work, that goal is met with varying degrees of success. Sometimes she outright fails, but occasionally a diamond pops up that makes the whole process worth it. This runway took place at a time when digital coverage of fashion was putting the industry into crisis. The whole world could now, for the first time, see fashion shows in high-res photos as soon as the show took place, and Kawakubo-san was revolting. Quote, "The future is in 2 dimensions," end quote. She said that to Vogue at the time. If you know Ray, you know that she's always angry. Reducing her creations to a flat 2D image must have felt insulting to her. As is so often the case, she took that anger and turned it into brilliant work. Long live Ray. Maison Margiela, Fall 2020 Couture by John Galliano. The video we are referring to in this review is called Swalk, Sealed with a Loving Kiss. It's the single best industry advancement that we got out of the COVID era. John Galliano was originally lambasted when he joined Margiela years prior. People thought he was too famous to lead a house that was, they said, about anonymity. John remained himself, of course, but he saw a different angle. Martin's anonymity was used to highlight the teamwork of the whole design staff. In keeping with that goal, Margiela in 2020 released a 50-minute documentary about the development of this collection. It is one of the most intimate portrayals of process the industry has ever produced. It also has now become one of the greatest fashion documentaries of all time. Martin's work was bursting with themes of teamwork and glamorizing process. Galliano and his team of artisans remained true to that vision and blessed us with a video that I have watched 4 times at this point. Valentino, Spring 2020 Couture by Pierpaolo Piccioli. Here we can see the other side of Pierpaolo's design language. It's almost goofy, and it features a ton of separates, which is unusual for couture. Typically, couture would just be dresses, but these are separates on the tops and the bottoms. Even at its goofiest, these clothes have such a sweeping beauty to them. The very existence of couture is constantly under threat. There's just no way to make money with dresses that can take up to 500 labor hours to create. And for that matter, even amongst those who can afford it, there's often a question of why someone would want to wear most couture. It's stuffy. Most of it feels old-fashioned. But this is a couture show that gives me a little bit of hope that we might be able to keep the medium around for a couple more decades. Nothing here feels stuffy. Even years later, it still has jubilance and modernity to it. I think this show in particular secured Pierpaolo's position at Balenciaga after Demna left. Marc Jacobs, Fall 2024. I'm just going to be straight up with everybody. I'm a fashion critic. I like to remain generally objective when I'm talking about things in my work publicly. Is that I have never really liked Marc Jacobs' design language. Holy hell, this work has grabbed me in the last couple of years, and this is my favorite example. Jacobs participates here in the tradition of human-sized doll clothes. But more importantly for this list, he's found a way to make feminine clothes for women that also make them seem 100 feet tall. How do you make clothes that have these proportions, that are this huge and still manage to make the wearer look traditionally flattering. Mark has been designing his entire life, but I've never seen him this focused. I look at the world created by these clothes, and I want to just stay there. Thom Browne, Fall 2020. Fashion loves a cute couple. It's just true. Fashion loves a cute couple. Also, fashion loves cute animals. A Noah's Ark show was inevitable for Thom, especially because myths, fairy tales, and parables are Thom's bread and butter. They give a timeless feeling to the show, but they're neutral enough because they're ancient to kind of let him go crazy on technique and do whatever he wants. This is the flagship moment for the famous Thom Browne animal bags. Additionally, Thom's technique obsession is on full display, and this show appears at a moment in Thom's practice when he seemed to be saying, "It's only gonna get weirder, folks, buckle in." Christian Dior, Spring 1998 by John Galliano. John's deep reverence for women is felt intensely in this show, where women elegantly dress and get ready. It's an elaborate process in the privacy of their boudoir, where they are simultaneously both in total comfort as themselves, but also in the process of transforming into their best selves. There is something theatrical about a woman getting ready, isn't there? This show always strikes me as Galliano's appreciation for how women just are. That the performance of being a woman can perhaps be appreciated like an opera or a ballet. I don't typically use this phrase, but it seems like in this show, you can really tell how much John Galliano loves women. Another Martin show, and I believe this is the fourth one. I'm not sorry. This runway show is also very unusual in the list because it expands what a runway might be defined as. This ultimately is a showroom and a short film. Okay, so this season was one where Martin defined a way to criticize the fashion industry while operating inside of it. Ready-to-wear clothing means clothing is released in standardized sizing, small, medium, large, this kind of thing. And Martin hated that. He thought that the clothes should be for the person that wears them, not the person having to kind of make peace with the clothes the way they are. So Martin created a jacket that made a person look like a dress form, the item in fashion workshops that they use to drape and try on clothes and make sure the sizing is correct. By making the dress form jacket, Martin was advocating for clothes to be made using the human body, rather than an impersonal system of creating garments for no one in particular. The Stockman dress is still one of the most central, iconic pieces of Martin's entire body of work. Thierry Mugler, Fall 1995, couture. In contemporary fashion, we have a genre of clothing design that's inspired by and speaking to the global nightlife population, club kids. These are the people who all shook hands and agreed that nipple pasties do in fact count as a top. Mugler managed to create a stunning collection of clothes meant to make every night as iconic as possible. The clothes are sexy, of course, but they've been given the rigorous royal treatment of a fashion house that also produces couture. And if that's too high concept for you, here's a robot lady. This is the birth of Venus. And here's a whole outfit built around this lady's ass crack. I don't even know if we can include the footage of that. We'll see. Junya Watanabe, Fall 2023. Junya has had a long career, and the modus operandi of his design language is a wide range. He can change season over season like a chameleon. But one of his consistent modes is the deconstruction tradition, which makes sense considering he used to pattern cut for the mother of deconstruction, Rei Kawakubo. This season features the highest risk, highest reward deconstruction I have ever seen. I want to be clear here. Considering all 29 looks of this show equally, this collection should be the primary case study for deconstruction. There's more historically important decon. There's certainly shows that have a single look that on its own is a better piece of decon. But for a whole collection of clothes made of cutting up other clothes and reassembling them, I have never seen anything better than this. And of course, next season, Junya did something completely different. Schiaparelli, Spring 2026 Couture by Daniel Roseberry. I am so thrilled to say that I did not want to include a recent show from Daniel Roseberry on this list. He is the best couturier currently working, so his work would make the list regardless. But I wanted to remind us of a great show from his beginning at Schiaparelli. I say that I'm thrilled to say that I didn't want to do that because the honest truth is that Rosebury keeps getting better. While creative directors were changing positions and beginning new eras all over the industry, Daniel can't stop inventing new kinds of fearful beauty. And in case it needs to be said, these elaborate couture numbers look fantastic in person. Many couture designs can be pretty disappointing without the sheen that's afforded by great camera angles. Rosebury's work may be over the top, but there are no tricks. He's the GOAT. Alexander McQueen, Spring 1999. This show is titled Number 13. Yes, this is the one where Shalom Harlow is getting machine gunned to death by the robot arms that are painting the very simple looking dress and ugly two set of colors. Sorry, the rest of the show is better than the finale. I get that it's dramatic and cool and stuff. This show bangs. No one talks about the other stuff. We got some of the craziest work from Lee. Nobody features it because they're too busy repeating the clip of Shalom Harlow. We do not have time to dig into every single look, but you can certainly tell from a supercut that this is Lee blasting on all cylinders. Balenciaga, Fall 2022 by Demna. Maybe the most visually memorable runway show ever produced by Demna. It was a chilly day in Paris when this premiered, but it certainly was not chilly enough for all this shit. The clothing and the product is again so nuanced that we can't really dig into it in this video. Suffice to say that this is the season when the leather trash bag was introduced. Truly an all-timer for runway rage bait. This is also one of the few runway shows where the models were being pushed physically. The snow is not fake. It was freezing cold in that dome. Demna also used the pre-show to pay tribute to the people of Ukraine. As a former political refugee himself, Demna wanted to make a small statement of solidarity through t-shirts that bore the Ukrainian flag on attendees' chairs. And that is it. That's number 95, if you were really counting. We did that on purpose because when the idea of a canon is being introduced to someone, a canon is just sort of like, these are the great pieces of art in a certain medium so that you know like what the classics are. Anytime a canon is presented, I think it is very important to leave room and leave the responsibility of that canon up to you all. I'm a fashion critic. Danny's a fashion critic. We are part of the fashion establishment. You as an audience member bear a huge responsibility by being a fan of this medium of art. We try to make this channel the best place to learn about fashion, better than any video, book, anything in the world. I encourage you to not merely be a consumer of fashion as a fan, but to be someone who is an educated, sharp member of the audience. I encourage you to go learn everything that you can about this medium. I encourage you to ask smart questions about clothes and fashion history and why people are picked as legends and other people aren't picked as legends. I want you to tell me what we missed here. What is important? What should be part of the canon? The pinned comment below is going to be my comment that I'm going to tell everybody to join the Patreon and stuff, but also to say what shows did we miss. Please, so that other people can get put on, respond to that comment and tell us every show that we missed, one at a time. Be specific. When you bring something, don't just show me your fave. Talk about why it's important. Go read other people's comments. Go engage with each other and talk about this stuff. This is like, Danny just said, this is like those assignments in college where you are required to comment on other classmates' work. I know it is in my best interest to sort of encourage the audience to sort of like shut up, sit down, and listen to everything that we say. I think that a medium of art is helped more than anything else by the educated, sharp, respectful, and curious audience. I mean it when I say it. We do have the smartest audience in fashion media. Go take that responsibility seriously. Love you all a lot. Go join that Patreon. Man, this shit is so hard to make. I truly appreciate the support. Content like this can't survive if it's not supported. There is no sugar daddy helping us. We need your help. I want you all to tell me what I missed. Remember, these are women's wear shows. We're not doing men's yet. That'll be soon. Love you a lot. See ya. Okay, so we're going to do... Oh my gosh. Ouch.